I'm not sure Cliff Kingsbury wants to jump right back into this.
Yeah.
He is rich. Made a lot of money. If I had to guess, I would say the next time we see him is probably in some Instagram account in Ibiza.
It looks like the Arizona Cardinals are completely overhauling their entire team, including firing multiple individuals in the front office. We have a lot to talk about today, man. Before we get to the content, recently I've been getting back into making documentaries for you guys. That's how I started this channel to begin with. Unfortunately for me, our Des Bryant documentary got age restricted. So did our Jalen Ramsey documentary. Multiple documentaries I made in the past on Junior Seau, Chuck Hughes, the individual that died on the football field, all got age restricted in the past week. And while I could support myself by making news content for you guys, I love making these documentaries as well. It's just very difficult sinking in thousands of dollars in a project that not only won't net me a return, which I don't really care about that, but on top of that, if my subscribers can't even watch it, that's when it drives me crazy. At the very minimum, if it was copyright claimed, at least you guys could still see it and I won't make a dime, and that would be great. But YouTube is literally restricting you guys from watching this content. So I have no choice but to post my documentaries onto Patreon. If you want to support the creation of additional documentaries, it's just going to be like $4.99 a month. I'm going to create a Microphone Plus tier on Patreon. If you have a better way of figuring this out, let me know in the comment section down below. And now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Man, it feels so good to be back in a studio and not in some hotel room. But I had a lot of fun recording content for you guys over the last 3 weeks, and I made it back on time for Black Monday. So for those of you guys that don't know what Black Monday is, it's the day after the NFL regular season where a lot of coaches lose their jobs. And while you could look at this in a negative light, most of the time head coaches are happy because, well, you get paid the money anyways. And we're gonna get to an example of that in this video. And fans are happy because if your team didn't make it into the playoffs, at the very minimum, you have some roster transactions to look forward to for next year. And if there's one team that needs an overhaul of their front office, look no further than the Arizona Cardinals. Now, bear in mind, I am going to do my absolute best to discuss everything that went on with this team over the past year, because there is so much to discuss that if I wanted to discuss everything, it might turn into a 45-minute video. During the 2021 NFL season, the Arizona Cardinals started off with a bang, winning their first 7 games of the regular season. This made Cliff Kingsbury look really good. Kyler Murray was firing on all cylinders. He looked like an MVP candidate. Steve Keim was celebrating the fact that he was able to pillage the Houston Texans of DeAndre Hopkins the year before, and he was still reaping the benefits of that trade. And you have to bear in mind, as great of a trade that was for the Arizona Cardinals, Steve Keim has made a lot of terrible decisions as the general manager of the Arizona Cardinals. Bear in mind, this is a human being that was the general manager of the Cardinals since 2013, so he was there for the Bruce Arians and Carson Palmer era. Then he had to figure out how to rebuild quickly. His first attempt at a rebuild came in the 2018 NFL offseason when he decided to hire Steve Wilks and also draft Josh Rosen with the 10th overall pick in the 2018 NFL draft. Now, Josh Rosen is one of the trickiest topics for me because coming out of that NFL draft, I thought he was the most pro-ready quarterback in the entire 2018 draft class. And I know that's very hard to believe, but back then you need to understand that Josh Allen looked like the next coming of Blake Bortles or Blaine Gabbert, unless the right team ended up drafting him, which they did. Baker Mayfield was seen as an average quarterback at best. Sam Darnold was perceived to be a quarterback that had all the arm talent in the world, but struggled with accuracy and decision making, which did end up translating into the NFL. And Lamar Jackson was perceived as an uber athletic quarterback with question marks in regards to his ability to throw passes. And that's just a very lazy way of analyzing all the quarterbacks in the 2018 NFL draft. So I don't necessarily think that Josh Rosen was a bad pick at number 10 overall. But unfortunately, between Steve Wilks and Josh Rosen and that horrible offensive line and not necessarily putting a lot of weapons around Josh Rosen, the Arizona Cardinals quickly got the number 1 overall pick in the 2019 NFL draft. During that offseason, they decided they saw enough of Steve Wilks Wilkes. They fired him after 1 season, and instead they decided to hire Cliff Kingsbury. And then the question became, what are the Arizona Cardinals going to do? Because Cliff Kingsbury definitely had a crush for Kyler Murray. I mean, look no further than this interview that went viral during the pre-draft process.
Purdy's a really good young player, and he's going to be a tremendous player, but Kyler is a freak. I've followed him since he was a sophomore. I've never seen one better in high school, and he's starting to show it now at the college level, and I don't have enough good things to say about him. He's phenomenal. I've never seen him have a poor outing, not one, which at quarterbacks it's impossible to do, but he's done it. I'd take him with the first pick of the draft if I could. I know he's signed up to play baseball, but he is a dominant football player, and I would take him with the first pick.
And ultimately, the Cardinals decided to draft Kyler Murray in the 2019 NFL Draft with the #1 overall pick and traded Josh Rosen to the Miami Dolphins for a second-round pick. Cliff Kingsbury was perceived as one of those offensive geniuses that was supposed to revolutionize the game of football by bringing the air raid offense to the NFL. And to be honest, he had a lot of success with Kyler Murray in the beginning. Well, in his first season, the Cardinals went 5-10-1, but Kyler Murray looked like the makings of a very solid #1 overall pick, despite being sacked 48 times during his rookie season. In 2020, they improved yet again to 8-8, with Kyler Murray's QBR and passer rating improving slightly, and his sacks being nearly half of what they were the year prior. 2021 was without a doubt their peak. The Arizona Cardinals came in red hot after an offseason that included adding future Hall of Fame wide receiver AJ Green, future Hall of Famer JJ Watt, James Conner, Malcolm Butler, Matt Prater, and Rodney Hudson. I mean, James Conner had a phenomenal season in 2021 as well. Cardinals would start out the season with a 7-0 record before finishing the season with a 4-6 record. Right when the season concluded, they got embarrassed by the Los Angeles Rams, and this is when things got very, very ugly. Kyler Murray had a horrific showing versus the Rams. He also walked off the field prematurely in the final game of the season. And while there were questions about Kyler Murray's maturity, they were ultimately put to bed somewhat following the Super Bowl. But that's when Kyler Murray would decide to begin scrubbing his Instagram account and hinting to the Arizona Cardinals that he wanted a contract extension. Ironically, right before he would ever get his contract extension, Cliff Kingsbury would get a huge contract extension throughout the 2027 NFL season. Whereas Kyler Murray wouldn't get his contract extension without his agent putting out a tweet that was very, very long, describing in an essay how good Kyler Murray was and how important he was to the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals would do this thing where they would include a homework clause in the contract, and then they would take back the homework clause, which was also embarrassing on behalf of Steve Keim and the Cardinals. And that's just leading up to this season. So this season, the Arizona Cardinals had a huge question to answer. Were they the team that won their first 7 games, or were they the team that went 4-6? And ultimately, after a turbulent offseason that also included their best wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins being suspended for the first 6 weeks of the NFL season due to PED usage, and a trade for Hollywood Brown to reunite him with Kyler Murray as well, the Arizona Cardinals looked very promising coming into this year. Unfortunately, things wouldn't go so well. Very shortly in the beginning of the season, you would see Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray getting into it on the sidelines, yelling at one another. And don't get me wrong, this is okay in the very beginning, but you would see it happen multiple times throughout the season. And then you would also see interviews like this.
He's real animated over there on the sideline sometimes, so ended up scoring, so that was good. But yeah, that's all I was saying. Just chill out. It's usually chill, until Sunday.
And what's funny is you would also see Cliff clapping back at Kyler Murray.
Shaking his head when I'm calling it in there. I'm like, all right, well, go ahead, big dog. I think anytime we can keep him involved, and he was coaching him up like right to the last second, like while they're trying to throw, he'd be saying stuff. He did a good job. It's just I would not want to play for Kyler Murray if I was a quarterback.
That's before we even mentioned Steve Keim and the Sean Kugler situation, where they fire their offensive line coach, who, by the way, happens to look like their general manager. And Sean Kugler also alleges that he was framed for something that Steve Keim did, and that's the reason why he was fired and why Keim took a step away from the Arizona Cardinals due to health reasons. We have a whole video on that. Following a season where the Cardinals would go 4-13, there were question marks about what their future was going to look like. Is this a one-off season for Cliff Kingsbury? Did he have way too many distractions going into this year? Or did they need to find somebody new to be their head coach? And on Black Monday, got our answer. According to Adam Schefter's sources, the Arizona Cardinals fired head coach Cliff Kingsbury, who 10 months ago signed a contract extension through the 2027 season. Cardinals still never had a head coach, any head coach, to last longer than 6 years, while the team has existed for over 100 years. I responded to this tweet with like a clever tongue-in-cheek tweet, which I don't think many people got, where I said I feel like Steve Wilkes would be an excellent hire for the Cardinals because Steve Wilkes was their coach prior to Cliff Kingsbury. But let me tell you what I think about this. I do believe that Cliff Kingsbury had great moments as a coach, but I do also think he was very underqualified to be the head coach of this Arizona Cardinals team. I believe that if they had Bruce Arians as their head coach with the team that they currently have, this is a team that could have potentially made it to the Super Bowl. I mean, JJ Watt was still performing relatively well for his age. They had a stacked wide receiver room, whether you want to admit it or not. Kyler Murray has a cannon of an arm and is one of the most versatile quarterbacks in the NFL, and their defense has playmakers like Budda Baker, David Collins, and Isaiah Simmons on it. Problem is, I don't necessarily think this all falls on the shoulders of Cliff Kingsbury. Although I do think he was underqualified for this job, Cliff Kingsbury gives me the impression that he would succeed as an offensive coordinator, and we'll get to his future in just a sec. I also believe this falls on the shoulders of Steve Keim as well. I mean, this is a man that repeatedly drafts linebackers, never even attempted to give Kyler Murray a better offensive line, never hit on a draft pick of a defensive lineman. And don't get me wrong, Isaiah Simmons is very versatile and exciting. Budda Baker was a great pick to move on from Tyrann Mathieu, which was very bold of them as well. And going with Kyler Murray over Josh Rosen seems to have been the right decision. But at the end of the day, I think this is a combination of the head coach not being qualified to take this job and the general manager not doing a really good job assembling talent for this team. Except the DeAndre Hopkins trade, I'll say over and over again, was remarkable. The Hollywood Brown trade, I understand the philosophy behind it. I don't think Keim is a horrific general manager. I think he's actually pretty average, but there's some things that he completely neglected for this Arizona Cardinals team. Now, what do I think Cliff Kingsbury's future is going to look like? I'll get to in just a sec, because the Cardinals have also announced that Steve Keim is also going to step away. According to the Arizona Cardinals, we've announced that head coach Cliff Kingsbury has been relieved of his duties. In addition, general manager Steve Keim has decided to step away from his position in order to focus on his health. The team wishes them well and thanks both of them for their contributions.
Yeah, focus on his health.
Sure, that's exactly what's going on here. There's just a really interesting story on him currently. The future for the Arizona Cardinals is looking like they're really seriously considering elevating their defensive coordinator Vance Joseph to head coach because he's very respected in the building. Vance Joseph recently was the head coach of the Denver Broncos. I don't really think it's fair to judge him as the head coach of the Denver Broncos because that was when the Broncos were also in QB purgatory. But if you ask me, Cliff Kingsbury has a decision to make. He could either step back and relax for a little bit and just get paid to do nothing because he literally just signed a contract extension 10 months ago. This is a situation that people would just dream of. Or a very adorable idea that I personally had is if the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy finds a new job, I'd assume Matt Nagy would get promoted to the offensive coordinator position because there's familiarity between himself and Andy Reid, which means Cliff Kingsbury could potentially get a job as the quarterback coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, which means he would have the opportunity to work with Patrick Mahomes once again. He was Patrick Mahomes' head coach when Patrick Mahomes was in Texas Tech, and also get the opportunity to expand on his offense in the NFL. I think him going to Kansas City would really help his career, and I think it'd just be nice to see them reunited. He clearly has chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. So let me know in the comment section down below what do you guys think about all this. Do you think the Cardinals made the right decision here? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.